So good afternoon, everybody, and I want to thank everyone so much for being here. This is a very important occasion, I think, for our department, our city, and for central New Mexico. In many ways, just as another symbol of one Albuquerque, but by more extension, this concept of unifying together across various boundaries to work on some of our deepest challenges, in this case, of course, domestic violence. So I want to do some introductions. Everyone deserves an introduction. I'm going to mention a few. We can catch whoever we didn't catch in the end, but also just as in case when folks do talk, you want to talk to them after, so for our media friends, you can sort of sort out whoever you'd like as well. So just in no particular order, want to mention ABQ Sane is here. Suzanne, give us a wave. All right, thank you for being here. And Enlace Comunitario, I think we have Marta here as well as some other folks. Thank you so much. Our Domestic Violence Resource Center, Jennifer Fierro and Vincent Galbiati, close. And of course, our Bernalillo County Community Health Council, Larry, I think you're here. Hinojosa? No? All right, nice, very good. And also our Fathers New Mexico, Gabriel Ortega. Didn't make it. Amazing. Because I thought we had this, but we're close. All right, so Casa, and this one, Fortaleza. Thank you. And so Lisa Wolf. And CYFD, we also have David River. Check. All right, nice. Okay, and a few others that I want to highlight. We, of course, have our CAO, Sarita Nair. She's been behind this project for a long time. As well as different individuals from APD. And we're going to hear from a few of these folks, so I'll introduce them when it's time. And we also have our state senator, Cedillo Lopez, right there. Thank you, Senator. Also couldn't make it, of course, Senator Lopez. And our New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Members from that? I think actually a lot of folks are, but right there, thank you so much. And then Tori Jacobus, of course, from our team.
Behind you.
From our Civil Rights Office. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share a few thoughts, and then we're going to hear from some of our subject matter experts on this. And so, of course, we also know it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this is something for us. More importantly than that is by recreating and reestablishing in a much stronger way this task force. This should not be about a month. This is something we have to do day in and day out in our community. And we know this is a national problem. We know that 1 in 3 women, 1 in 7 men are victims in their lifetime of domestic violence. We know that 20% of homicides last year were domestic violence related. And we also know that these are some of the most dangerous calls that our police department responds to. And for us, we also understand there's a very challenging dynamic around this with respect to reporting because of the repercussions that can happen in your own family and even in your own social circle. And so for us, we really want to also stand up and support the courage to report these crimes. And it starts by us as a city and as a police department believing in victims and supporting individuals, especially women, when they reach out and when they speak out. And that's part of what this task force is also going to work on. Now, we know that in Albuquerque, we are coming out of a decade of some of the highest crime on record in our city. And we also know that we have a department that's still vastly understaffed despite our recent improvements. But we believe that we are climbing out of a hole. And we understand now, too, that there's a cycle that is all about the sort of drugs, gangs, domestic violence. And you put a weapon in the mix, especially a firearm, and that is driving most of the dangerous crime and violent crime in our city. And so we have to address each one of those, and that includes very much the domestic violence piece. And for us, we've often treated this as sort of some of the outcome of this combination. And now we're really saying we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to treat domestic violence as a standalone issue of its own right, and that also means doing what we can in terms of prevention. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today. Here's what we've done so far recently with all the partners that we mentioned behind me and the individuals who have been working on this, in many cases, their entire professional careers. We are doing things that are on the law enforcement end, like the warrant roundup at the AG's office. but we're also restoring the FAST unit and the CACU units. After historical shortages, we're now building up those units again. And these are the two key units when it comes to dealing with domestic violence. We are also continuing to clear the rape kit backlog and also prosecute what we can out of that backlog. And so, by the way, we haven't done an update on that in a long time, but that's actually, it's in great shape. So we continue to process it at a steady pace, and we are on target to hit the goals that we announced for clearing the backlog. But of course, those are still about a year out, I believe. So we're also looking at dealing with violence intervention. And this is something relatively new for the city of Albuquerque. You're going to hear more about this in the next 6 weeks or so. But we are talking about it on the teenager side with respect to teen violence, but we're also looking at it on the gang side, and then also as it ties into domestic violence, especially because families are usually caught up in this kind of retribution-based violence that we see. And so we have a new unit that we're going to be talking about in the future that's going to be working on those issues as well. But today, we are here to really honor this executive order. And this executive order right here reinstitutes the Domestic Violence Task Force, but it also adds a lot more formality. It adds a lot more teeth to the task force. And I think most importantly, it adds a diversified membership that truly reflects everyone involved in trying to reduce domestic violence in our community. And so today we're reconstituting that task force based on this executive order, and the individuals that we mentioned earlier are all in different ways participating in this effort. So for us, this includes representatives from the advocacy community, service providers, especially multilingual service providers. It also, of course, includes CYFD, Bernalillo County, City Council, our police department, fire and rescue, family and community services, and our legal department, especially the Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Office of Civil Rights. And at least by executive order, one survivor. Now, this task force, the goal is to deliver specific, measurable, and achievable recommendations for actions that the city can take. And it's also meant to improve coordination and make changes in city policies, ordinances, and increase services by optimizing grant funding. This is another area that we think we can make a lot of progress on now that we are united. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the challenges that we have are so great, there's no way one entity can do any of this by themselves. And what this task force really honors is, again, that concept of being part of one community, which we happen to call Albuquerque, and dealing with these challenges together and facing them head on. And so for us, we actually believe that in many ways the work this task force is going to do is actually going to save lives. It is extremely important for our community, and it's time we step up and lift up our community together in many ways through this task force. So with that, I want to hand it over to our Deputy Director in charge of a range of issues, especially when it comes to the intersection with our criminal justice system and also behavioral health, and also a clinically certified social worker, our Deputy Director of Family and Community Services, Gilbert Ramirez. Gilbert, come on up.
Buenos dias, good afternoon everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm truly honored with the opportunity to be able to speak to you all with this announcement. I was thinking back like what would I talk about, and I did have some history as an adjunct professor when I taught a class on family violence for New Mexico Hines University to a group of graduate students. And I thought it'd be important to kind of cover some of the things I covered in that course and what the spectrum of violence can really look like. So, you know, when we talk about domestic violence, we must understand there's a spectrum of abusive behavior that can exist in some of our most cherished and trusted places. It can exist within intimate relationships like marriage, dating, within your family, and or environments of cohabitation. It can take the name of domestic abuse, spousal abuse, battery, family violence, or intimate partner violence. What we know is that domestic violence is an issue that exists across cultures. It impacts individuals across societies and ages. It does not discriminate amongst those with higher or lower socioeconomic status and or restrict itself to just one gender. With regards to our children, who are often the innocent bystanders when domestic violence is present, they grow up in environments in which they're exposed to it. witness it, and or are injured either physically and or emotionally as a result of it. This contributes to the promotion of a generational cycle of violence that is passed on to our children, promoting a very unhealthy reality and definition of what a safe and healthy relationship should look like. As a clinician, I have worked with children and families over the last 20 years. I've been on the receiving end of young people as well as parents disclosing their stories to me of the violent environments in which they've either been in, continue to be in, and feel that they have no other option or supports to either exit from or to protect their own from. We know that this challenge can be better addressed when all of us come together to be able to do this. I think today allows us the opportunity to bring individuals from across different practices, experts in their own areas, survivors who have been through this, to lend themselves, and the city is just one small conduit in bringing that together and supporting this to be able to create some change. If we are to address the impact of generational cycle of violence, that which we teach our children of what is normal and or accepted versus what is healthy and or unsafe, we must push ourselves to break down the stigma and shame that survivors often must carry and work to build a culture of support and acceptance that is so necessary to support those seeking assistance and our help. I'm so very thankful to those who have accepted this invitation to be a member of this task force. They bring with them a wealth of knowledge, diversity, and experience, and passion to work toward healing our community and safeguarding our residents, to mitigating, reducing, and promoting hope toward improving how we as a community respond to domestic violence. The Department of Family and Community Service is truly honored to be a member of the task force and provide the support that will be needed to see these objectives followed through on this task force and hopefully achieved.
Okay, and next we'd like to hear a little bit from Lisa Wolf-Francis. She's the Executive Director of Casa Fortaleza.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Liza Wolf-Francis from Casa Fortaleza. And we provide sexual assault services to anyone who needs them. But we also focus on Spanish-speaking communities because we recognize that there is a need within different communities to have services specifically geared towards them. We also recognize that there's such an overlap with domestic violence services. I feel very honored to be a part of this task force. Thank you very much for including Casa Fortaleza. I see and have seen in my work for many years doing domestic violence work and also sexual assault work, how much sexual assault is also in domestic violence. And how really when there's one type of violence in a family, there's often many types of violence, and it puts the family at more and more risk. So today I would like to actually read a poem that I wrote. I'm also a poet and writer, and I thought I'd do something a little bit different. This is a poem I wrote a couple years ago. It's called Still Life Photograph with a Young Couple and a Gun. He holds the gun to her face for the camera. When I see it, this picture has been shared on Facebook 400 times. Introduce a gun into a piece of theater, and the audience knows at some point the gun will come back, upping the stakes once again. This is no theater. She is his captive, but his eyes hold terror like the prey of spiders, and hers are numb with routine. He grips his merchandise, holding her up for all to see. I am her sister. Step back, put the gun down. He has made her his possession. She is his baby doll. She will be anything he wants because she is afraid. I am her mother. Put the gun down. Leave her alone. Run. Every threat from him is a push for her to forget who she ever was without him. I want her to see me through the photo, to see how long I stare at this image of her, furious that there is nothing to do. I want to take him out of the picture, plop him on some other website, maybe one with lions or dragons. I want to leave her there alone, to regain her posture, with as much time as it takes. I am her grandmother. Put the gun down. This is not a romantic gesture. It is violence. And now it has been done to all of us watching. We are all waiting to see when the gun will return, biting our nails, saying, this is no theater. I want you to hear me. Step back. Put the gun down. Leave her alone. Run. I wrote that poem for survivors and for an actual picture I saw on Facebook. And this is just one of many, many instances. And of course, as was mentioned before, a firearm raises the lethality. This task force, I believe, will be one answer to people saying, well, what can I do about this? Well, we are here to act. We are here to take action and to make our community safer. And it's also a way to say she doesn't have to be alone. We're all here for her. We are going to act as a community to make things better. Thank you very much.
Now we'd like to ask one of our survivors who's here to share a few words. Actually, we have two of them, Larry and Keena. Please, if you're up for coming on up, are they? It's okay if not. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what we'll do instead then, let's do this. Let's take a few questions, and then there's obviously a lot of folks here. So why don't we take like max 3? And if you want more, we can just do pull aside. So, and Senator, would you like to say a few words?
No, I'd like to ask a question.
Okay, you can.
I think it's fantastic that there's so much diversity and that you're including Casa Fortaleza and Enlace Comunitario. But one of the things in the immigrant community is the fear of police, fear of going to the courthouse, fear of getting services. And I just wondered if you directed the task force to look at that and look at solutions. And I just say that from the Senator's perspective, anything I can do to help, I'm here to help.
Well, we know this certainly is part of what the task force is to work on, and I'm going to say a few comments about that, but then if anyone else wants to speak to that, if you work in your individual areas in this, come on up. But I know for us, this is also why what we're doing with our police department is so important when we talk about community policing, because those historical divides obviously are very real and exist. What we're doing both through the DOJ but also on our own is trying to reconnect those bonds that make essentially a trusted relationship between law enforcement and the community. And part of that also is making sure that people know that they're safe as immigrants, regardless of their status. So I think also what our city has done in our Office of Equity and Inclusion to consistently tell people this is an immigrant-friendly city, and the various executive orders and so forth that we've done to layer everything we can do as a city, even ordinances on top of that, we have done. And so we need to, I think we've laid the policy groundwork, at least in the city, but we also need to make sure people know that, because a lot of people don't know actually how protected they are in Albuquerque. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I could say something.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Green from Albuquerque Sane. And at Albuquerque Sane, people don't have to identify themselves, so they can use a pseudonym. We don't need identification. And so our services are free. People can come in the middle of the night. If they're afraid to come to the building because there's a police presence in the building, they can come when the police presence isn't here. So I think that we want to do as much as we can to make people feel as comfortable as they possibly can in a really bad situation.
Okay, other questions? Yes.
Yes, hi, I'm Hannah Colton from KUNM. My question is about the response time of officers. I know it's been a big problem for years, that even if someone has, overcome maybe barriers they have in calling the police, call the police, and then the response time is fast enough and more harm is done in that time. And obviously, domestic violence calls can be dangerous for police, as you said. What is the task force doing specifically to address the emergency response time?
Okay. Let me touch on that a little bit, and then I might see if our commander wants to add anything on that. I think in general, too, we're looking at response times all over the city. Of course, this is something that happens every year for all types of calls. And we have made some improvements, especially now, so we have more granularity to be able to track specific types of calls. And this is going to allow us to have then varied responses. And so I think that's part of what our violence intervention program will be analyzing as well. So the commander will talk about that in just a minute. I think the other thing that I want to mention is the challenge is so bad, right? Even calling anyone can increase violence, let alone, so in other words, even if they show up instead of 5 minutes, it's 2 minutes, that's still too long. So that's why we're trying to provide alternative outlets as well, both for prevention or in some cases, so people have someone to talk to at any point in their day or their lives. That's not that phone call in the heat of the moment, because that's actually statistically, I think, a much more successful way to prevent future violence than making that one call to APD. So do you want to add to that? Sure.
Good afternoon, I'm Commander Joe Burke, and I am the commander of the Criminal Investigations Division as well as the Albuquerque Family Advocacy Center. In regards to response times, it's very important to realize that our efforts to increase manning has been successful. Of course, we're not at the level that we want to be at, but as we increase the number of officers on the street, those response times will go down. In the meantime, we're doing our best to make sure that they're properly prioritized through our dispatch, and making sure that we utilize all of our resources so that when officers are dispatched, that they are well informed of the progression of the call as well as the history of the call. And that comes through our real-time crime center, which is a key component of making sure that officers are informed so that when they do get on scene, they can handle the problem immediately and effectively and efficiently.
All right, last question, anyone else? Okay, there's more if anyone wants. Thank you all so much for coming, and congratulations, thank you all.